What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. Now, in today's first Entitled Parents story, a store employee unfortunately gets one of her fingers dislocated by an entitled customer. Entitled customer dislocated my finger. Keeps on shopping. Pre-COVID, I worked at a big club warehouse in customer service. The job was great and members were usually awesome. But every now and then, you'd find the most entitled sons of bees to ever walk the earth. Based on the way they treated me and others, I can only assume they don't even see us as human. We were only lifelike robots built to ring up their items and load their carts. One such incident that proves my assumption happened on a super busy Saturday. It was pouring outside. Members were fighting over parking close to the door, then bolting for the entrance as if their lives depended on it. As a courtesy to members, on rainy days we always had someone outside in the front of the cart return bay to dry off the carts. This day was so busy, members were coming in faster than I could dry carts for them. Most were super nice and patient. They waited in line for a dry one, and almost everyone thanked me. A few who were in a hurry or didn't care about dry carts just skipped the line and grabbed a wet one. One such member rushed up and grabbed a wet cart from behind me. Sometimes carts get jammed or snagged together. Usually, it's the buckles for the kiddie seats getting tangled, but sometimes it's a warp in the cart from damage. This poor member grabbed one such warped cart, and it dragged its buddy with it. The member attempted to dislodge it. He yanked, he twisted, he shook them violently. He looked at me and demanded, "Help me get these carts separated." I offered him a dry one instead. Nope. He wanted that cart specifically for some reason. I abandoned my drying rag and attempted to pry the carts apart. It was like trying to separate two buffaloes in a horn log. They refused to budge. I looked at the metal flap that allowed the carts to nest into each other. I saw where it was snagged and reached in to coax it free. I placed my other hand on the lip of the second cart to give me leverage while I untangled them. The member demanded loudly, "Come on, I'm in a hurry." He decided I was clearly too incompetent to separate them, so he reached out to give the front cart one more tug. At that exact moment, I loosened the second cart and the front cart sprang free. It launched forward, catching my thumb between it and a second stationary cart. I heard the pop sound of my thumb dislocating a few seconds before the pain hit me. I yanked my hand free and managed to stifle my choice profanity with less fireable words. It was actually sucking sticks of saffron on a ship. My supervisor witnessed this and still tells people it's his favorite outburst. This member just looks at me like I'm nuts. There, all I needed was a cart. Was that so hard? I'm cradling my oddly shaped hand. Sir, I think you broke my finger. The member just shrugs, huffs, and walks into the warehouse. He looked like he forgot I existed the second he took his eyes off me. My supervisor witnessed the whole thing, but was more worried about me, not the member. He pulled me aside and radioed for ice. Lucky or unlucky, I am very pain tolerant. It's not actually the first joint I've dislocated. I also know the easiest way to end the pain is to just reset the joints. So, I fiddle around with my weirdly dangly thumb until I feel it click back into place. My whole thumb was swollen and turning a lovely shade of purple, but it was back in place. My supervisor got me sent inside to write up an incident report. He sent a posse of employees into the store to find the member and sentence him to banishment. But as it was insanely busy, they never found him. By far the worst customer ever. Well, at least I got an extra day off and a great macabre story out of it. Well, OP, that's amazing that you can look at it like that. I mean, this whole story sounds horrible, to be honest. This guy especially, it's so weird. He's such a stubborn person. He doesn't even care, let's be honest, about the cart itself or, whether it's wet or dry. I mean, who wouldn't want a more dry cart in that situation? Of course, he would want a drier cart rather than a soaking wet one that's been out in the rain used by other people recently. But his own stubbornness was telling him, no, I have to have this cart purely because this person can't untangle them and neither can I. But I need this cart. I need to untangle them and use this sopping wet cart just because I'm so stubborn and I don't know anything better. Well done, mate. You caused a serious injury. Good on you. Okay then, moving on to our next story. Had a bogey on my tail in the parking lot, so deploy flares. So, this happened about a day ago. Honestly, I'm still getting a few random giggles thinking about it. This feels like a pretty good example of entitlement, but I apologize if not. Anyways, I have a local grocery store near me with a decent sized lot. It doesn't usually end up full, but I guess yesterday was crazy for reasons I've yet to care finding out about. There was no space and drivers looking for spots that had even less patience. I got in well enough to the store to do my minor amount of shopping, exiting with barely 2 bags full of snacks and sandwich makings. As I exited, a few of the hovering parking spot snipers were following people from the doors to cars. A guy in a large hatchback tagged me and slowly followed me. Usually, I would dip between cars to the next aisle over, and they don't bother to follow because it gets a little creepy then. I don't like people willfully hovering behind me like that, even less so when in vehicles. Nope, not this guy. He guns it around the aisle and back to me to follow my path. I jump across again, pretending I was an idiot who forgot where I parked. Guess what? Follows me again. This next time, I'm far more blatant about shaking him off, and I double back. He promptly lowers his window and shouts at me, "Just find your freaking vehicle so we can both be happy." He doesn't even give me a chance to reply before rolling his window up again. I figure my bags aren't that heavy, and the cold was enough so that my sandwich meat was fine if I took a bit. So I began wandering aimlessly, letting the guy think I'm finding my vehicle when I knew exactly where it was. He cursed at me a couple more times, and seemed to think he was my designated replacement to a spot. I didn't time it, but I believe he hung on for 10 grueling minutes of my wandering before gunning it hard out of the lot, going straight through a 4-way stop and garnering the ire of several drivers. No cops, unfortunately. The funny part, as I left, I could clearly see a few scattered spots he could have taken if he weren't so obstinate or driven by pure spite. The best part though, I walked to the store. Oh my god, no way, that's insane. Oh my god, that's amazing. All that time you're telling me you had no car and you were just doing it to mug him off. Genius? What can you say about this man? Genius, intellect, 2 million IQ, an absolute legend, a man that doesn't care, a mad lad. I could keep going because that is just brilliant. Well done to you, just making this entitled person look like an absolute mug for no real reason. Brilliant scenes, and to be fair, it kind of was karma because why track someone around a parking lot when there are other spots opening up? Honestly, the similarities to our first story are ridiculous. There are other spots to go in. There are other dry carts to take. Just take them. Don't go for the one you were going to go for in the original spot just because of spite, just because you're too stubborn to understand that it will save you time just to go and get another cart, go and get another spot. Why? I don't get it. Just these people are so stubborn, man. And now moving on to our final story of today's video. Karen, he's taken and not into you. So let's set the stage. I am Ellie, my boyfriend is Tom, Tom's friend is John, John's fiance is Jane, and Jane's sister is the Karen of this story. Don't worry if that's a little bit hard to follow, guys. It will all become very clear and obvious. My boyfriend Tom and his friend John had been friends for years and hung out quite often. John had lost his first wife and infant son in a car accident years prior. Oh my god, John, I'm so sorry. John had found love again in Jane and would bring Jane along. Jane is now his fiance. Tom was also starting to bring me along to events. Lately, Jane's sister, Karen, was also starting to tag along. Karen also had 2 children from 2 prior marriages and could not afford babysitting, so she'd bring them along. This prevented us from doing adult activities and talking about adult topics. I'd also noticed Karen constantly giving me a chronic female dog face look. Then she seemed to make every excuse to be around Tom. Once, Jane's car needed new spark plugs. Tom's a pretty good mechanic, so he offered to change them for her. Right behind Jane was Karen. Karen would also make every excuse to get between me and Tom and get me away from her kids. She also started to give me faces that said, "Stay away from him," and "You're the only reason why I can't have him." After John and Jane got married, John and Jane wanted to take Tom and I out to dinner, a double date. We made sure it was just the 4 of us. Well, 10 minutes before dinner, we got word that Karen and her kids would be joining us. At the dinner table, I had to play a math game with Karen's son. Tom was doing the same with her daughter. Out of the blue though, Karen yells in my face, "No math at the dinner table!" but left Tom completely alone. I later asked Tom if he felt that Karen was trying to hit on him, and Tom said yes. Tom assured me that he had no interest in Karen, and even if I wasn't his girlfriend, he still wouldn't have an interest in her. She's just not his type. He wouldn't even consider her as a friend. The only reason why he treats her as a friend is because she's John's sister-in-law. Now, if Karen was a teen or someone in her early 20s, I would have just brushed this whole thing off as immaturity. But Karen was a woman in her mid-30s. Over the course of a year, things progressively got worse. Now, aside from tagging along with John or Jane to see Tom, Karen was now coming to Tom's place alone. Tom kept brushing her off, telling her he was busy. Karen, though, never seemed to get the memo. We would even blatantly mention the book and movie He's Just Not That Into You during conversations. At one point, I was even afraid she was going to try and hurt or kill me just to get to Tom. Finally, one day, Karen showed up and Tom's mum was also there. Having known what had been happening, Tom's mum confronted Karen. She said that Tom and Ellie, OP, are together and that Tom has no interest in her. If she shows up unannounced one more time, she will help Tom and I file a restraining order against her. She also said that she had a black belt in karate. She does. And that her husband has a nice arsenal of guns. He does, and isn't afraid to loan us some. Tom also called Jane to tell her that the next time Karen showed up uninvited to a get-together, he and I would be the ones cancelling. Although Karen stopped showing up unannounced, she became super friendly with Tom at parties and get-togethers, especially when I wasn't there. John had a birthday party at Karen's house. I couldn't attend due to work. Tom told me that virtually the whole time, Karen would follow him and offer him a seat, even in the middle of the hall. For those of you wondering why Tom didn't just tell Karen to knock it off, Tom doesn't like confrontation. Tom's also a large guy, 6'5", 300 pounds, but he's a gentle giant and quite a softie. He doesn't like people thinking he's a big and tough guy, so he doesn't show it. Quite often, he did mention to Karen that he had a girlfriend and was happy with her. Like me, he assumed a twice-divorced 30-something-year-old woman would know better. He also talked to John and Jane about Karen. Jane said she would handle her sister, but we're assuming she never did. Why? You'll find out next. This story has a very twisty end. John and Jane divorced after 18 months of marriage. When Jane and John first met, Jane had a lot of credit card debt. She had a sob story about how it was to help her mum. After they got married, John helped pay off all of the debt. After the debt was paid off, Jane started maxing out their credit cards and transferred a majority of the money in their joint bank accounts into her personal. Then she walked out and filed for divorce, leaving John with all the debt. No Jane meant no Karen. We later found out Jane never actually changed her name to John's last name, even though she claimed she had. Looking back, Karen was probably going to do the same thing to Tom. Fortunately, Tom wasn't interested. Tom and I have since gotten married and started a family. Okay, wow. I was not expecting that ending. That is mad. So all that time, these two girls were literally just trying to, get with random men, steal their money, and then get out of there? Holy, that is crazy. Marrying just for the money, by the way, on its own is mad. But marrying to ruin someone's life, max out all their credit cards, then take half of their money anyway for, the divorce, and then leave them completely in the mud having to deal with all the debt that you've accrued from maxing out the credit cards? What sort of villainous, evil sisters are these? Jesus. I mean, genuinely, I think Jane is more of a Karen than Karen herself, because to be fair, we don't even know if Karen was going to do the same to Tom, but it does seem quite likely that they were probably working together and probably conniving to get as much money as they could from two fake marriages. Wow. You're just lucky, I guess, that Tom wasn't interested at all, and he sounds like a great bloke, because my God, if he'd been swindled, that's his life ruined. I hope John's okay, by the way. A horrible thing to go through. I feel sorry for that lad. I hope he's okay. I hope he's recovered. But wow, what a horrible pair of girls. Anyway, guys, that is going to do it for this one. I really need an update to that final story because that is nuts. They need to be put away for, that is crazy, both of them. I mean, Jane, obviously way more so. The stuff she did is genuinely illegal, I think, anyway. But Karen as well, horrible people. I want to see some justice, guys. If you want to see some stories that do include some good justice, check out these ones on screen right here. They are great, both of them, and they have some great karma in them, which you're going to love. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe, and I'll see you all tomorrow with a brand new upload right here. See you then.